And when the nation is in the mood for change, it responds to charismatic optimists. FDR, JFK, Reagan, whatever you think about his policies, he did fill that need in Americans. Clinton, and then Barack Obama last week. It makes me a little embarrassed to admit it, but the first time that I saw Barack Obama, which was, as for so many of us, the 2004 speech at the convention, I have to admit that I felt not just that I had seen a rising political star, but that I may have experienced an enlightened being. There was something so clear, so calm, so centered about him. As I say, it almost embarrassed me to feel that way. Then, when it turns out that he's an excellent politician and a superb manager, that combination gives me great hope. Turns out what I saw as enlightenment has been borne out by people within the campaign, all sorts of people saying, and we saw it all as a nation, calm, collected, sure, so much of those kind of qualities. Our multiple severe crises may have finally broken through our culture of distraction so that people might finally, it takes crisis for people to be ready for change, so that people might finally be ready to ask questions and to question answers and maybe even to consider some fundamental changes. Given all that, I believe that Barack Obama may be the ideal president for this moment in this country. Today, rather than spend the time talking to one of those knowing individuals, I want to spend it with you. What I want to know from you, from those of you who call in and get on the line, first, your reaction to the election. Just your personal reaction, and then some next steps. The next steps you'd like to see from Obama. And finally, next steps you think that the people ought to take. First, let me offer a few thoughts and observations. For as long as I've been doing this show, and it's over 12 years now, hard to believe, I've been trying to make it solution-centered. Okay, solution-centered, yet I'm not Pollyanna. I don't think it's honest or realistic or even helpful to act as if an hour of good news is enough to nourish you. So we've always offered critique as well. Needless to say, over the last 8 years, the Bush administration has offered us plenty to criticize. But I also don't think it's healthy or helpful to depress you with the weight of the world's failures or feed a full diet of blame and gotcha. Now, everybody knows the expression, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Well, I've realized that what this show is really about is a slight variation on that. These words, it's broke, let's fix it. Because I think it's pretty clear most things are broken. Take your pick, healthcare, education, energy, climate, the media, the Constitution, the economy, defense, foreign policy, on and on. Though the news last week was good, I believe democracy is also broken in very important ways. So what I want to know about each of these issues or arenas is, how is it broken? What's the evidence? What are the symptoms? How do we know? What's going on that tells us something's really out of whack? Then, how did it get broken? What are the causes? Who's responsible? How did we get here? And then, how do we fix it? What are the solutions? What's the treatment? What are the innovations? Who's doing the good work? Who's already working to get us there, to help us fix it? And then finally, how do we pitch in? How can listeners get involved? Where can you learn more? What organizations and initiatives are worth supporting? And what actions can you take today, and what actions can you take tomorrow? So, in addition to your responses to the election when you call in, feel free to respond to that set of ideas. I'd love to hear from you. Again, the 3 questions. How are things broken? How did they get broken? And how do we fix them? With regard to the election and next steps, let's remember that in another moment of national crisis, Franklin Roosevelt ran in 1932 on a fairly moderate platform. So how did his presidency usher in the New Deal? that paved the way for 50 years of progress, which is what successful progressive policies are supposed to do, I think. He did it because the people took the lead and held his feet to the fire. He actually made no secret that the farmers and labor unions pushed him and provided the cover that allowed him to make bigger changes than he'd promised. Now, as a nation, if you recall, we failed to do this with Bill Clinton. I believe he squandered a potentially progressive moment by playing to the center. Remember, he was not a man unwilling to take chances. That quality nearly brought him down. But he was unwilling to take chances with policy once he failed on gays in the military and health care reform. This nation is in need of fairly fundamental change in many areas, and the enormity of our economic and foreign policy crises provides a real opportunity. People might finally be willing to change, and it's our job to make Obama bolder than he has been thus far. Okay, I'll offer some more thoughts as we go on. We're going to be joined at one point by Timothy Carr of freepress.net to talk about the Obama election, the Obama administration, basically to have him answer the same questions I'm asking you. In his case, how is the media broken? How did it happen? How can we fix it? And what would be next steps that we would want to take? We would want an Obama administration to take, and what can we do to make sure that he does so? But first, let's bring in a caller. Let me have Joshua in from Hollywood.
First of all, I love your show and stuff, and it's, every time I've heard that in the last 8 years while I've been, grinding my teeth at what we've been dealing with, but I hear that opening of your show, it's like, when something like Obama comes in, it justifies how many times you've said that under completely different conditions, and now when you say those words, it's like, oh yeah, all these people are in line, and it's like, oh yeah, we get it. Sort of a metaphor for what we all need to do, which is sort of, we've been used to resisting and having to point out what is wrong. In a way, we can sort of move forward a little bit with an Obama and kind of get on with our work. When you talk about him being enlightened, I think it's the island influence on him as a child. I was lucky enough to study in Indonesia wood carving, and the first thing you realize when you get to that island is just there's a magic to it, and a basic magic. And I think for him to be exposed to that much light that early on, and also the Hawaiian influence, island people in general have a certain magic, and I think he's downplayed that. His magic act, and now, obviously this is his first big to-do, but I think we're going to see how he reveals it slowly as it goes. I think as what people can do.
Let me just respond to what you said. One thing that I have experienced, and I'm assuming when you say Indonesia, if you're working as a woodcarver, it might have been in Bali. Am I correct?
Correct.
Okay. One thing I've experienced in Bali and in Hawaii, especially Maui and Kauai, is that being islands, and you can feel the earth is alive.
There's something there.
The wind moves at all moments. The clouds pass. There's something that you can in a city.
It's something.
Whether a city is covered with skyscrapers or covered with smog and so on, I think people can tend to forget that they are living on a living thing, that they are part of something alive. And so I would bet that that's part of what you're talking about. Now, you were saying what I think you were getting to the next steps of what you think listeners can do. This is Joshua giving us his thoughts.
Yeah, just I think that now, and also like I was giving you props for like the last 8 years and the work that KPSK's done. It's, the job now is like, oh wow, we've been having to point out what's wrong and having to, micro sort of point out, the details of how we've been sort of manipulated, and not that stops, but I think to a certain extent, now we have to, there's a big shift and there's almost an exhaustion, a molecular sort of DNA exhaustion that happens where you're like, oh, I've been resisting all of this and now there's a whole different type of energy. And I think he gets that, where he realizes he's got to kind of, bring it down and slowly get this water kind of moving in another direction and see where it's moving. I think personally we can all start moving forward and feel so good and kind of grab the empowerment of all the good things we've done. Quickly, something talking about the press and manipulation and sort of like Diane Sawyer, like a couple of seconds after California called it, there was an African-American commentator on the field, and Diane sort of immediately turned and said, "Oh, and let's cut over to my good friend, such and such," the African-American female in the field in Chicago. And the other commentator, the white male commentator that works with her, said, "She's not just your friend." And it was, you could see this high school thing happening, that suddenly to be African American, it was like, it suddenly went up. And I watched the mainstream press and I thought, oh, wow, you guys are so transparent, and it was a little bit embarrassing. But it also shows that people like KPFK who have been righteous the whole time, I think it's just time for us, people who have experienced, lucky enough to experience African Americans in our life, in a positive way, can now get on with it and see what happens and watch the magic. But I'll let you get your other callers.
Let me hear from Juan in Santa Barbara.
Guantanamo, ACLU mentioned that it needs to be closed, that he needs to repudiate torturing, and I suggest that Guantanamo be turned into a weather research center in cooperation with Cuba, now that Cuba has been hit with another storm, and usually the storms come to the United States. So to show that he wants to cooperate with other nations and ways of working in the world, he could return Guantanamo to the Cuban people and make it a cooperative venture, a weather station to manage the global climate, observe what's going on with our planet.
I like that. I know that some of his advisors, I heard early in the campaign, actually, were hoping that he might change relations with Cuba, that's something which the president can have a great deal to do with. And that would be an opening. I read another thing today, I forget who said it, but said like Nixon going to China, it would be the idea of opening this would clearly show that times had changed. Nicholas Kristof of the New York Times, he proposes that Guantanamo be turned into an international center for research on tropical diseases that afflict poor countries, as an example of multilateral unilateralism, humanitarianism. But I see your idea that here we are in the Atlantic where hurricanes happen, and hurricanes becoming more frequent and more fierce due to global warming. That would be a place to set up a research center and hope that it doesn't get wiped out. Thank you very much.
Let me finish that.
Yeah.
The first step on canceling all the military bases around the world and turn them into research centers, universities, community centers, and so on.
Yes, one thing that Americans, I think, know far too little about. Robert Scheer has a strong book about it, as well as Arkin. I'm forgetting his last name, his first name, but is that we have over 700 bases around the world. And I think you're right, beginning to close those down, turn them into something else, and bring those people and that money back home. Thank you very much, Juan. Let me bring in Gina from West L.A.
Sherry, I listen to your program whenever I can, and most of the time I agree with you. This time I partially agree with you.
Okay.
I teach elementary school, and we talk a lot about the difference between talking the talk and walking the walk. And I think Obama is talking the talk. And I think he's extremely charismatic. But whereas you think that these charismatic people, such as FDR, Kennedy, who actually was more hawkish than Nixon, Clinton, who I actually thought was going to cause change, I think sometimes we get distracted by these charismatic people that are put forth at the time of problems so that we don't hold their feet to the fire.
That's right. No, I believe I said that. Let me just remind you. What I said was that when America's ready for change, as they were in 1960, as they were in 92, as they have been, as they were in 32, they respond to charismatic optimists. Now, it's then the job of the charismatic optimist and the people to make sure that opportunity is used for good and for as much good as possible.
And what's kind of making me feel, unfortunately, that it's going to be just talking the talk, number one, the person that he's appointing as his chief of staff couldn't be worse. a reactionary as far as a reactionary could be as a Democrat, totally against the Palestinians, completely in bed with the hedge fund people. How can this be the person that he appoints as his chief of staff? And I know people justify it as, well, the chief of staff is not that big a deal. But when you buy the people that you pull around you, you are paying back to who got you in. Obama got the most money from Wall Street. Biden is certainly not a progressive. So to me, Biden is an insurance policy that Obama, even if he feels like going progressive, will know that he wouldn't.
Well, let me give you a response to that. Rahm Emanuel, who you're talking about as his chief of staff, that is the first appointment, and as the first appointment, we'll get right now is getting an enormous amount of attention. But I think what it tells us at this point is how he wants his staff to run. In other words, we don't know yet, I don't think.
This man abuses other people emotionally. He's not a person that brings people together. If you know what he did in the Clinton, one time he was like hitting the table with a steak knife, as to in responding to people. This is not a person who brings people together.
Right. I'm with that one. Listen, when I first heard it was Rahm Emanuel, I took a gulp. Okay. What I'm saying is we don't know yet. We'll know more as other people get filled in around him. And if they continue to go in that direction, we'll know what you're saying. If they don't, what we'll know is that he wants a tight ship. He wants things to happen. He doesn't want things to get sloppy. Now, in his campaign, there was no Rahm Emanuel, but boy, was that campaign sharp, crisp, on point, on message. So all we know so far is that this is the guy he thinks can run the show. It's still Obama, and everything I've read, by the way, about how his campaign worked is that one of the keys to their success was that they didn't have to have a lot of focus groups and a lot of meetings to figure out how to respond to things and what to say, because basically Barack Obama knew from the first who he is, what his message is, and so he has clarity. And Rahm Emanuel is going to be, as someone said, Rahm Emanuel is the enforcer to his poet, to his, he will evoke possibility, and Rahm Emanuel will be the enforcer. We have yet to see who else he will have and how that will turn out. But I can understand your doubts. If you look at Rahm Emanuel's specific positions, I can understand your doubts.
But going along with the Patriot Act, talking about moving troops into Afghanistan, talking about not taking bombing off the table for Pakistan, to me, that does not sound like we're working for peace right now.
Okay, so what did I say? I said he may be the right person for this moment because he invites action. In other words, what I don't think we need right now is little steps, is little minute policies and so on. It is our job, as it was the farmers and the union members with FDR, it is our job to make him put that power to our use.
Well, unfortunately, I think it's the system, not just the person. So even if Obama means well, which I think there's a lot of good parts of him, I think that changing the system, you can't change the system when you're the president, even though Bush did try.
Well, but wait, as I'm gonna let you go now. But what I keep saying is, I agree with you. It is our job. He was elected not just because he got money from Wall Street and not just because he had Joe Biden as his vice president. He was elected because he had millions of people working for him, and he says that it is up to us. I really agree with that. So what I want is for that passion that I hear in you right now to be translated into whatever you can do to make sure that the policies that this opportunity is put to use are the ones we want. Thank you very much, Gina. Susan from Reseda.
Well, first of all, my thoughts about the elections. I was actually very happy to finally see someone, in power that we can relate to on different levels. So I definitely think that Obama is great for this country with what he brings into the table from his previous experiences with, community organizations and so on and so forth.
And constitutional law, something that we could certainly use.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. As far as what something that he always says is be the change you want to see. And since we have a lot of broken systems here now, as far as the economy, the healthcare, many to count. There are many to count, but definitely the economy is the number one thing he was brought into office to focus on, and that is where he needs to start. And I would say healthcare would probably be the second point of focus.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's ways in which they're very related. Some people are saying that the best thing he could do right away is to work on healthcare, because that is the thing which is breaking so many people. Now, I agree with you that the economy is, the shining red light in front of us that has to be dealt with. But if you can begin, as we've said on this program many times, healthcare is something which is absolutely essential to people, and yet the difference between what it costs to do Medicare and Medicaid and what it costs to do private insurance is about 15%. So about 15 cents of every dollar that we spend on healthcare, somewhere between 10 and 15 cents of every dollar we spend on healthcare in the private insurance system goes to marketing, advertising, paperwork that doesn't actually provide health care. So one thing that has occurred to me, and let me see what you think about this, is that how people look at Wall Street and say they were cheating, it was a scam, what they were doing with the credit defaults and the subprimes and so on. There's some way in which if you have an essential service and you basically are stealing 10 cents on every dollar because it's not going to provide that service, I'd say that's a scam. It happens to be one that we've accepted for a long time, and that when we were rich and had the luxury of kind of ignoring it, we could let go. But maybe at this moment people finally say, you know what, that whole health insurance thing is a scam. Go ahead.
It is. That is very true. It is a scam to a big extent. And yes, he could potentially start with healthcare and all the issues that affect daily lives directly, as in education and lowering fees on students that don't have money to spend on them, lowering the fees of healthcare that a lot of people. This is a real story. I was at the dentist yesterday. I had to drive my mother to the dentist, and this guy walks into the dental office, and the lady asks him, "Hey, Dennis, do you have insurance?" And he goes, "Well, no, I don't really have dental insurance." This is very important. It's a very important point. As well as I go to UCLA, and we have to spend more money on our classrooms. And the last thing that actually came out of the government was with Arnold cutting, one of the major, the Center of Labor at UCLA,
right,
which helps our city very much, and all the people that work, in Westwood and in LA, and that are impacted by that.
Okay, I'm gonna let you go, Susan. Let me say one thing that I hear in what you're saying. There are certain things that you spend money on that are investments, and there are certain things that are just purchases. And I think what you're saying is healthcare, education, those sorts of things are investments. And even if it means increasing the deficit, we need to invest in the things which will make us stronger, richer, and more sustainable in the future, which is something we have not been doing for too long. Thank you very much. Let me take in another guest. Let me have Tressel from L.A. Tressel, thank you for holding. Welcome to the show. Your reaction to the election and the next steps you want to see us take. Let me have Arnett from Ventura.
I just want to say I felt sort of like Tressel. I was very, very elated. I agree with that one lady who had doubts about Obama.
Mm-hmm. How do you square those two things? One, you're elated. Two, you have doubts. How does it all work for you?
I'll explain it very easily. First of all, he's the first African-American to ever be elected. We needed to break through that barrier. It was good for the African-Americans. When you see fully grown men crying, you know that a lot of people had no faith that they had a future in this country, kind of, or that there was hope for them to rise to the top level. And on the one hand, I have that feeling, and I have the feeling of hope because he can change things. He can be a vehicle for change. Depends on him. I'm not really keen on Ron Emanuel at all. But on the other hand, I think that I agree with you 100% that we have to push him. It's up to us to push Obama to be more progressive, because he's going to have a massive amount of pressure coming from the military-industrial complex, from Wall Street, from the corporations, everyone.
Yeah, they don't take a day off. They don't say, for them, Election Day is the one day they're not in charge, right?
Right.
And then the next day, boy, as far as they're concerned, they're back in charge. They've got the money, they've got the practice, they've got the connections. In fact, lobbyists are going to increase, I think, as much as they've been increased. I think they're going to increase for a while in their power to get money, because they're going to say, we don't know this guy. You're going to have to pay me more. I'm going to have to work harder to get them to do what we want. So it is our job. One thing, by the way, on the Obama website, he has, I don't have it for sure, it's change.gov, I think, but go to the Obama website because he has a thing saying, tell me what you want me to do. From the moment he was elected, he put up a place on his website for people to say, okay, I'm glad it happened, now here's what we want.
Yeah, and that was the second part, the second question you had as to what I think he should do. First thing I think he should do is just say, no more torture. We're going to, allow habeas corpus for everybody. No more enemy combatants. Close Guantanamo. Pull out of Iraq and Afghanistan would be the next step as quickly as possible without putting our people at risk. And then I think also that we need to start looking at the economy in a big way and how to help people at the bottom, not this $700 billion bailout for the already wealthy who parachuted out. A lot of those CEOs.
Right. I really agree. I think it's interesting. I wouldn't have known that people would so quickly go on the torture or Guantanamo issue, but I think you're right. In other words, the economy is the one that we've got to save our own necks. The Guantanamo and torture is where we have to save our own souls.
I agree 100%. And also, it's going to send a message to the people in the Arab countries that we're not monsters anymore.
Right. To the whole world, that things are different.
And then the other things, health care, of course, I think we have to have universal single-payer health care. That's kind of a dream at this point, but if you think about it, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt got in, the 8-hour day was a dream, and a lot of that stuff that he got, unemployment insurance, Social Security, all that stuff was a dream when he came into
That's right.
That would never happen. And also with Lincoln ending slavery. And all of those guys, they came in, they were kind of weak. They weren't stand-up guys when they charged in. You can't be really powerful when you're campaigning.
That's right. Well, you can't be bold when you're campaigning for the most part, because that makes people nervous. Especially, it might have made them nervous in this case from what was a relatively inexperienced African-American man. Thank you very much, Arnett, for your thoughts. Next, I'm going to bring in Tim Carr from freepress.net. Tim Carr is the campaign director at freepress.net. Free Press is a media reform organization that has done wonderful things. I will say this before I bring him on. But echoing the words of the last caller who said certain things were dreams and then they became reality. When Free Press first organized itself, the idea that you could have a large grassroots activist organization built around media reform, net neutrality, things like that, and that it could actually stop media consolidation in its tracks, as it did in 2003 and again in 2008, and that it could make this a hot issue and an issue where the powers are no longer in charge, but they're having to listen to people. It has been achieved to a great extent, and as I say, beyond the organizers' expectations, and we have to take that model to other areas where it's not happening yet. Timothy Carr, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Terrence.
Okay. I'm going to ask you the same questions I'm asking callers. Your reaction to the election, what you think Obama's next steps, and what you think the listeners, the people's next steps should be.
Well, at Free Press we look at all these issues through the spectrum of the media, and we see in an Obama presidency a huge opportunity for us to really fundamentally reform the media as it stands today. Your previous caller had mentioned the military-industrial complex as being a concern. And we're concerned about the media-industrial complex, which is really held so much power in Washington. What we're looking at today is control over the media that's still consolidated in the hands of very few companies. But we're really at this critical juncture right now where the Internet has risen as this new democratic force in allowing people to have voice, allowing like a single blogger, for example, to have as many readers as the New York Times on any given day. And so we want to protect this revolutionary new model of free speech and make sure that the public is very engaged as well in protecting a more democratic and accountable media system. So we've been very successful, as you said, at Free Press for the last couple of years of organizing people around this idea of a better, more democratic and diverse media system. We've been, over the last, the lifespan of our organization.
Which is how old at this point?
We're only 5 years old.
Yeah.
We've been fighting against a very entrenched Congress and a very entrenched Bush administration, which has been in favor of more consolidation, has been really in favor of consolidating power over the Internet in the hands of companies like AT&T and Comcast and Verizon. These are the largest Internet service providers out there, and we've been fighting them to regain control of our media experience. So Barack Obama has spoken out over the past.
Let me just ask you. He took several stands during the campaign that are things we like to hear. If you could mention a few of those.
Yes, I mean he has come out very forcefully in favor of net neutrality, which is this idea that control over your Internet experience resides in the hands of the end user. The company that sells you a connection, like a Comcast or an AT&T, cannot come and say, well, wouldn't you rather go to this website? We're going to block your access to this website. I'm sorry, you can't do these sorts of things online. The way the Internet has prospered as such a democratic force for us is that because we ultimately retain control. We can decide where we go. We use whichever applications we want. All of that control resides in the end user. And it's under considerable threat right now because as more and more people get high-speed Internet connections, we're starting to watch videos and we're starting to listen to music.
And eventually we're going to be downloading entire movies and so on. And I know that where you're going with this is that some of the companies, the providers say, it's gotten to a point where it's overloaded and we have to charge extra if you're going to be downloading movies and videos all the time. If you're just sending email and doing searches, that's okay. You can get that for the price you're paying now, but we got to charge a premium. And basically that changes the whole ball game.
Well, it's more than that. I mean, they see a threat. Comcast, which is the largest cable Internet provider, also provides cable television services, and they see a threat to their legacy business model. So if people are going to start watching television via their Internet connection, if they're going to start choosing their television viewing experience the same way they choose whichever website they want to go to, then our whole business model on the cable side is collapsing. So we need to take more control over that. And just to get us back to the Obama administration, during his campaign, he was very outspoken in defense of net neutrality, in defense of our basic rights to protect our Internet experience, to not allow companies like Comcast to come in and say, you can't go here, you can't watch that. So we're very hopeful that in his next administration that he'll put some teeth to net neutrality legislation. We did have net neutrality as sort of the operating principle behind the Internet until about 3 years ago, and it was taken away by very forceful lobbyists in Washington, and we're looking to the Obama administration to put that back in place.
What should listeners do?
I'm sorry, what's that?
What should listeners do?
Well, listeners can go to, we've got a coalition called SaveTheInternet.com, which is over 850 groups, and when there was a threat to net neutrality in 2006, we had more than 1.5 million people go to SaveTheInternet.com, take action and support net neutrality legislation. There's a real movement going on there, and that's something that Free Press coordinates along with about 800 other organizations.
And that website again?
SaveTheInternet.com.
That's easy enough. Okay, thank you very much, Timothy. And it's been wonderful to have you stop in on this show and keep up the good work. Let me ask you one question before I let you go. There was something that happened last week that I don't know the full import of, and maybe listeners don't either. What happened with what are called white spaces?
We had a pretty momentous decision at the Federal Communications Commission which is the agency that oversees communications in the United States, they decided to open up what's called white spaces. And white spaces are pretty easy to understand. If anybody can remember watching television via the old sort of rabbit ear model, and you would click around on your dial, there were stations between the stations that actually were just static. And that represents empty spectrum. And the FCC has just decided to open up those airwaves for high-speed internet connections. So that means that rather than having like a Wi-Fi connection every time you go to a local Starbucks, you actually have massive clouds of internet connectivity that can go anywhere basically a television signal can transmit. And that's really important in rural parts of the United States where tens of millions of Americans can't actually get land-based internet connections. It's too expensive to build a fiber optic cable out into rural Montana, for example. Now we have opened up our public airways to a wireless internet services. So this is a real big change that will bring cheaper, more affordable, more accessible high-speed internet services to more Americans.
Okay, and that was one I know that you campaigned for, and a lot of petitions went in, and it turned out the right way. Thank you very much, Tim Carr. He's at freepress.net. Brian from New York, welcome to Free Forum.
Good to be here. Good to hear you.
Okay, your response to the election, your feeling of next steps for Obama and next steps for the people.
Well, I guess what I have is as much an observation as a question, and jumping off from where you started the show, what's broken, what needs to be fixed.
Oh, right.
And it's a symptom, I guess, of what's broken, and that is we seem to have a culture of irresponsibility. There's no realistic accountability. Certainly this last administration, that's a hallmark of the way they approach things. There's incredible figures, amounts of money that are just sort of batted about. And I mean, you've got $700 billion here, $10 billion a week there. They're just these incredible amounts of money that nobody can even, you know that you're not going to pay it. Where's it going to come from? Well, somebody else will have to deal with it. See, and actually what I'm hearing is, from your previous guest, is sort of a solution to this in a way. Anyway, that's just my observation.
Okay, and let me just amplify on what you said about the lack of accountability. One of the things that is kind of added up over the last few years for me is this. In the early Bush administration, we had the Enron, WorldCom, Adelphia, etc. All of those, there was enormous fraud, theft, corruption, bankruptcies, and so on. People's life savings were wiped out. And when we looked at what the problem was, the problem in many cases was that the accounting firms, the former Arthur Andersen that went out of business based on this, the accounting firms that used to actually monitor offerings, stock offerings and so on, were in bed with the companies that they were supposed to be monitoring, and they weren't doing their job. Accountability missed. The Iraq War has been funded for 5 years now with emergency supplemental appropriations. Never have the costs of the Iraq War been in the defense budget. What this means, I asked some figures in the defense arena, why? Why would the Democrats, once they took power, still allow the war to continue to be funded on emergency appropriations? They said It means there's no accountability. If they actually said, no, the war's been going for 5 years, it's no longer an emergency, it's an ongoing thing, then they would have to make tough choices. They would have to play their role of providing accountability. They didn't want to because they didn't want to make the tough choices. And then you look at the financial arena and what was going on with an awful lot of the subprimes and the credit default swaps and so on was that Standard & Poor's and Moody's, whose job it is to rate offerings, again, like the accounting firms in the earlier case, they did not do their job. And when you see in our corporate sector, our defense sector, our financial sector, these huge breakdowns that, how do they happen? In every case, the people who were supposed to be watching the hen house, the people who were supposed to be providing accountability have not. I think that is a very, very serious problem in this society.
It's endemic. I mean, it's everywhere.
Right. And there were many other ways in which the Bush administration indulged in that, having to do with torture, having to do with all sorts of things. And I really think, so what you're saying is, if you use the principle of accountability, that'll probably tell you a lot of things that Obama should do and that we should push for. Thank you very much, Brian in New York, and thank you for listening from that far away. AJ in the San Fernando Valley.
Hey, Terry, how's it going?
Very good.
Hey, I really respect your work. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You supported the Biona Wetlands campaign way back. Thank you for doing that.
Okay.
Hey, first of all, as far as accountability, I want to say we need, as progressives, to hold ourselves accountable.
Absolutely.
I want to say the first thing for me important is that as far as the news, we need our news 7 days a week, so we're not forced to go to Fox News or NPR or other things that we don't trust as much. So I think that's essential. We need it 7 days a week.
You're saying like KPFK should have its news on every day?
Exactly.
Okay.
And so we don't miss out. So we don't have to. We're not forced to go to other sources.
Right.
Consistent every time, every day. And if it needs to be preempted, it should go on at another time that day. Okay. Thanks for hearing that. Now, as far as Obama goes, two things I want to say. First of all, I'm as progressive and as radical as anyone else, and I would have loved to see Ralph Nader.
Right.
Get in, but the president has to govern. First of all, we have to be realistic. Those people probably could not have gotten into an office, and I think we have to be happy with Barack Obama. He's as good as we can get right now, I think.
Mm-hmm. That's my feeling. As I've said, he presents an enormous amount of potential, and then we will see and we will participate in what happens with that potential.
I want to talk to that. But as far as some of the other callers who may, wanted a perfect person in there, we can't expect that. That's not how our world works. So we would have liked maybe a Ralph Nader or Cynthia McKinney, but we can't really expect that right now. So I think we should be happy with Barack Obama and work with that. He's got a lot to offer.
Yep.
I think the difference between a Barack Obama and what we've seen him before is that he's actually saying to us, we the people, that he will listen to us.
That's right.
Not only will he listen to us, but he wants us to communicate with him. He's encouraging us, asking us to communicate with him, as opposed to Vice President Dick Cheney, who said in response, what do you think that the American people are against this war? He says, so what?
Exactly. And I remember when millions marched, Bush said, we don't focus group our decisions. One of the things that I think is worth knowing is that Barack Obama and his brain trust, when they set out to run for president, they knew, given the Hillary Clinton and the Rove machine were the two obstacles they were going to have to overcome, they knew that the only way they could do it was to involve millions of people in the campaign in ways that had never been happened before, including the funding of it, but really the volunteering and the running of it. And they revolutionized the way campaigns are done, but as I say, based from the very first moment on the idea that they could only do it if it was a grassroots movement. And now that grassroots movement has to stay, has to remind them that we're if they're going to dance with who got them there, we're the ones who got them there.
Many people are wondering, how do we do that? I'd like to respond to that.
Okay, quickly.
Besides all the activist work, being involved in nonprofit groups, community groups, et cetera, I think the place we need to start is in places which is what is lacking in this country is real community where we're at, in our communities, in our homes, in our workplaces. I think that's really what's lacking. So a simple thing that people are overlooking, which they may think is not important, that doesn't matter, but really does matter, is the base of being involved, is starting in the three places where we can all start, okay? That's in our homes, in the place where we work, and in our neighborhoods.
I absolutely agree. So when you say start, you mean start being the change you hope this country will be.
Do that. It's real simple, okay? It's something I say on the air. You might have heard it. Everybody heard it, probably heard it, is we need to show up and be present with the group that we live with, that we work with, and that's in our neighborhood. Be present and monitor what's going on and give input.
Okay, I got to let you go so I can bring in more people, but thank you very much, AJ. Robert in West L.A.
Sort of amazed that Prop 11 passed. Somebody mentioned Arnie a while back. This is a proposition that he supported. It favors only Republicans
Let me explain to people what Prop 11 was, because some of you, whether you voted for or against it, there are probably some who either don't recall or weren't really sure. Prop 11 is the one that changes how we define assembly districts, state senate districts, and congressional districts. It is currently done every 10 years following the census when there's new information about the demographics in each area, and it has been done by the state legislature. The problem that Prop 11 claims to be addressing is that if you let the legislature set its own boundaries and you let the two reigning political parties set those districts, they will set them up in favor of incumbents and in favor of those parties. And what you end up with is weirdly shaped, gerrymandered districts that ensure safe elections for both parties, which means that actually the extremes of the two parties are most likely to get elected, and you take away sort of a lot of the vibrancy of democracy. 11 creates an appointed commission to make those decisions instead, and it did pass. It was favored by League of Women Voters, Common Cause, folks like that, but as I will let you take on in a second, Robert, one of the issues was that committee, that select committee, that commission that's going to change them, starts with an equal number of Democrats and Republicans, and then a few people who are declined to states and independents. Well, this state is not 50-50 Republican-Democrat. Most districts are not 50-50 Republican-Democrat, and yet that's where it begins. Thank you. Go ahead, Robert.
That's exactly my point. I call it a Trojan horse. And, if I'm wrong about this in the future, 5-10 years from now, if we're still talking about this, and it turns out I'm wrong, no one will be happier than I.
Right.
But California, let's face it, is the golden goose when it comes to elections. The electoral votes that come from California are coveted. We've been a blue state. We've been in the blue column. Republicans hate this. They have made this known. They would like this very much to be in the other column. It would serve their purposes. This new proposition, in the end, I believe, is the first keystone in the foundation toward building basically a red state out of California.
Yeah. Now, I would say, by the way, that's a long shot. If you look at the demographics of this state, both in terms of youth and in terms of ethnicity and so on, I think we are moving ever more blue. So what I think they're doing is they want to at least stop that. They want to get more. But what I said prior to the election is, although ideally I think that we shouldn't have legislatures building their own districts, because I think it is bad for democracy. However, what I said was, I would say California should pass Prop 11 when Texas and Florida are willing to pass Prop 11. And that or especially Texas, in other words, Texas, a state that would be sort of the analogous. It's the second most populous state. It's a red state. We'd like to see it turn blue. If we'd done a handshake and said, we'll pass a Prop 11 if you will, that would have been one I would have supported. We got 2 minutes. I'm going to let you go, Robert. I'm going to bring in one last caller, and it's going to be Wendy in L.A.
Two things that I want to mention. I think that Obama should, first and foremost, end the war. He was not for the war, so I think he should end it. And also, I think there should be prosecutions of the CEOs and the CFOs that have brought down the financial system in this country. And I do not think Obama can do it alone. I think us as citizens need to take a page out of his handbook and use the emails to email our senators, our congressmen, and request what our wants are.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm going to let you go so I can wrap up, but thank you very much. Thanks to all of you. I must say, I don't do callers very often because I feel like I've got so little time. I want to, get all the information I can, but this was very enlightening and encouraging. Wonderful input. Keep up the good work.